Thanks for coming. My name is Richard Gruisin. I'm the director of the Center for 21st Century Studies. And before I provide a more proper framing for the day's events, I wanted to introduce Michael Listed, who is the Associate Dean for the Humanities, Associate Graduate Dean for the Humanities, and also a philosopher of science. Michael's been involved with the Transdisciplinary Challenge program, which is the source of this colloquium, really from its inception. And he's been a really vital member, and so he's a perfect person, I think, to give you the formal welcome. Just to give you a map, after Michael welcomes you, I'll come back, give a little introduction to the day as a whole, and then turn it over to our participants. So,
Thank you, Richard. Well, as Richard said, I'm Michael Liston, Professor of Philosophy here at UW-M, and Associate Dean, actually, for Arts, Humanities and Architecture in the graduate school. I'm very pleased to welcome you all to this symposium on transdisciplinary research and its promises and its perils, and goodness knows it has enough of each. And I'm especially pleased because the symposium grew out of the work by the winners of the first C21 Transdisciplinary Challenge grant. A kind of a program that I think was Richard's brainchild when he came here, but it's funded by the Chancellor's Office of the Graduate School. That work was performed by a transdisciplinary group, Tim Ehlinger from biology, Ryan Holifield from geography, and Manu Sobti from architecture. And I think it's, appropriately transdisciplinary. They focused on borders, conflicts, and boundaries arising in the borderlands of the Oxus, Lower Danube, right, and Milwaukee rivers. And I say appropriately because in some sense, given that the focus was borders, conflicts, border lines, things like that, it's a useful metaphor for the larger discussion that's going to take place here today on the general challenges of transdisciplinary research work, which has to deal with kind of negotiating borders and boundaries and conflicts. With that, I'd just like to say welcome to Ryan, Tim, and Manu, and welcome to our colleague symposists who have traveled from near and afar. Richard, I'm sure, will do the proper introductions. And welcome everybody and enjoy the symposium. Thank you.
thanks, Michael. This is really an exciting day for us here at the Center, for me in particular. I think, as Michael mentioned, this program, the Transdisciplinary Challenge program that's now in its third iteration, began in the fall of 2010, fairly shortly after I arrived at UW-M. I started as center director in the summer of 2010, and in the fall, the then Associate Dean of the Humanities, Jeff Merrick, set up a number of meetings for me with administrators across campus, various deans, graduate dean, other faculty who were interested in the kinds of projects that I was hoping to encourage. And when I came in as center director, I wanted to obviously build on what the center had done in the humanities, but I talked about adding sort of two wings onto the center, one being a wing for digital work, and we've been moving in that direction, trying to foster work in digital humanities in a variety of ways. And the other was a wing, sort of what I just shorthand referred to as a STEM wing, but a wing that would allow us to begin to make more connections between the humanities and sciences, engineering, and professional schools as well. So as it happened, Jeff Merrick set up a meeting for me with the Dean of the College of Engineering and with the interim director of the School of Freshwater Sciences, Mark Harris. Well, the Dean of the College of Engineering, when we set up that meeting, was Mike Lovell. And in between setting up the meeting and the date that the meeting was scheduled, Mike had been named interim chancellor. And in fact, the meeting was on, I think, the first or second day of his interim chancellorship, and I wasn't sure he would make it. But actually, it was a sign, I think, of his character and of his interest that he did make the meeting. And so when I told him what I was interested in doing with the center and mentioned the STEM wing, he said, that's what I want to do. And he said, we're going to do something big on that. He said, I don't know what we can do. I haven't even looked at the budget yet, but I'm going to take a look at the budget and see what we can do. So out of that initial discussion, he found out how much money he could put aside. It was money that seemed fairly large, especially for humanists, but I think even significant for scientists and engineers as well. And we developed this proposal, this Transdisciplinary Challenge program, which invited faculty, really required faculty to assemble teams, faculty who were interested, assemble teams that consisted of at least one member from the traditional constituency of the center, which would be the humanities, arts, or the soft social sciences, and at least one member from outside of that constituency, with the challenge to think about research problems that could not be formulated or addressed by any single discipline. So that was the challenge, and the first year we got a number of really excellent proposals, but we really got one that stood out, and that was the group of Tim, Manu, and Ryan that will be presenting today and whose research is behind this symposium. And so a couple things I want to say very briefly about their proposal and really about what we're trying to do here. In a way, one of the things that Tim especially, I think, has sort of keyed me to is the notion of boundary objects and how various kinds of either organisms or environments might serve as boundary objects, objects upon which different people from different disciplinary perspectives can agree upon, at least agree that, yes, this is an object that we're concerned with. And I like that concept because in a way I think the Transdisciplinary Challenge program is a boundary object itself. And I think it's a boundary object partly for the chancellor, who has one vision of what transdisciplinarity is, a boundary object for UWM faculty who have a variety of different ideas about what transdisciplinarity is, and a boundary object for the Center for 21st Century Studies, which I think has evolved in its understanding as well. And I know I've evolved in mine in terms of what transdisciplinary work is. And most recently I've been reading through a book called Tackling Wicked Problems, which I think it really provides a nice definition of the concept of wicked problems, which I think can ground an understanding of transdisciplinarity. So I just want to briefly read a quotation about what a wicked problem is. They define a wicked problem as a complex issue that defines complete definition, for which there can be no final solution, since any resolution generates further issues, and where solutions are not true or false or good or bad, but the best that can be done at the time. Such problems are not morally wicked, but diabolical in that they resist all the usual attempts to resolve them. So what we're trying to do is to encourage faculty and teams of faculty to identify such wicked problems, and then, having identified them, bring to bear tools from disciplines that often may have nothing to say to each other in solving those problems. And the proposal then that was put forward by this team, I think retrospectively, because I hadn't really known the concept of wicked problems at the time, but I think really defines such a problem. So now, before turning this over to Manu, who will introduce T.S. McMillan, our first speaker, let me read just a little brief few sentences from their grant proposal, from the winning proposal for this grant. This interdisciplinary project examines the complex issues of conflict, tolerance, and resolution over watershed impact, exploitation, and restoration within a global sampling of borderland and territorially bounded spaces. How have borderland ecologies been uniquely fashioned by specific conditions of landscape, events, actions, and interpretations? What new tools do we need to manage water and aquatic ecosystems in ways that engage scientific models with a multiplicity of experiences in such places, marked by tumultuous histories and unequal power relations? How will such tools be deployed, and for what purpose will they be used? Which values, interests, desires, knowledges, histories, and investments of meaning should they incorporate? You can see just from that brief description of the problem that this is the problem of borderland ecologies, of boundaries, is indeed a wicked problem. It's not going away. And each borderland, each boundary proposes problems that are distinct, I think, to its own particular social, geographical, biological conditions. So this project was, I think, an excellent one for us to begin with, and an excellent one then, I think, to introduce this symposium addressing transdisciplinarity. Finally then, just one brief word about the structure and how it emerged. We, in planning this symposium, which is one of the requirements for the grant, that the winning team make some public presentation of their work, we decided it would be best not only to have Tim, Ryan, and Manu speak about what they've been up to during the 2 years of their grant, but for them to bring people who they knew and had worked with from outside to address some of these key questions. So we asked each of the 3 participants in the grant to invite a person that they thought would be really valuable to speak to us and to speak to these questions. And so that's the structure we have up on the screen today. So I'll ask each of the members of the Transdisciplinary, the Borderlands Boundary team, to introduce their invited guest. And that would mean that Manu would come up first, introduce T.S. McMillan, we'll take a break. Then Tim will introduce Karen Grattan, take a break, and then Ryan will introduce Morgan Robertson. And we'll have questions after each of the speakers give their talk. And then after the 4 o'clock break at 4:15, we'll have a round table where Tim, Ryan, and Manu will briefly talk about what they've been up to, and then we'll open up the floor really to everybody, including invited guests, to talk about the perils and promises of transdisciplinarity. So enough for me, Manu.